Today on
Doomed!
it's just been literally just non-stop news. Just event after action after protest this past week. And honestly, there's a lot to talk about. It's been about a week since the last episode of Doomed. And I feel like we should just jump right in because there's a lot to talk about. You know, I feel like there's been a lot of shows that start lately with me sort of just overwhelmed by a situation because it's overwhelming. If you're trying to follow what's going on right now, you might feel like it's all just mushing together into one. Like a protest in New York, a protest in Minnesota, a protest in California, a protest in Texas, a protest in Ohio, a protest in Louisiana. It's all just... I mean, I was looking at clips earlier, and I was like, oh, the cops, the NYPD, just tried to run over those protesters to get through a protest line. That reminded me of a clip I just saw a couple hours earlier from not that California clip. It was the one in Los Angeles, not the one in Oakland. You know, it's and let's you know, I guess I should start at the beginning because literally the last episode of this show was just a couple days before George Floyd was murdered by a police officer. I mean, it was cold-blooded. He killed him. We have it on video. This man was on the floor, posing no threat to anyone. And this cop, you know, I haven't even really been watching like the news, like cable news, television news. I've basically just been reading everything and watching the on the ground clips because I just don't want to, unless it's something I want to pay attention to because it's something to be debunked or ridiculed. I don't want to hear cable news or mainstream media coverage of this because they're botching it. Of course, obviously. So excuse me if I'm saying the police officer's name wrong, his last name, Derek Chauvin. Because I've only been reading his name. I hope to not say his name for the rest of this episode, to be quite honest with you. I mean, he has his knee in the back of George Floyd's neck. And the poor guy's on the floor saying, I can't breathe. You're hurting me. I can't breathe. And apparently, I guess it doesn't really matter to these four officers, you know, the one who has his knee on his neck and the other three who are also on top of him. Two of them are on top of him. The other one's just standing there. None of them do anything. It doesn't matter to them. You know, and this is not them. It's wrong to begin with, but this is not even a momentary thing that happened to restrain him. The man's restrained. He's on the floor. Something like 9 minutes pass. I mean, it was, you know, the word overkill or over the top or excessive force. I don't even think that's justice. How ridiculous this was. And Renee says Chauvin is his last name. Thank you, Renee. And George Floyd died right there on the sidewalk. If you're watching the video, I'm not gonna play the video. I understand people who think the video is important. I understand people who think enough is enough. I think I totally feel for whatever your opinion is on this. This is not something where there is a correct answer, if you ask me. If I had been doing this episode the day of or the day after, maybe I would have played the video so people understood what I was talking about. At this point, about 5 days in, you've seen the video or you haven't seen the video, and you should go watch it if you think you need to, or you shouldn't if you don't think it's necessary. But I don't think I need to play it for you to understand how ridiculous this is. At this point. The obviously, if you haven't been paying attention to the story, I think you can tell where this all went. The officers walked away scot-free, got to go home to their family. George Floyd was taken off the floor by the EMTs. His body was already he was dead. They picked him up and there was no life there. I don't know if they found a pulse. Like I believe I read it when I first saw it, but I can't remember now whether they had a pulse or not, because it doesn't really matter because he died. He's dead. He's not coming back because a human life was taken by a police officer who decided to put multiple police officers, but especially one who had his knee digging behind the man's neck for 9 minutes while the man is on the floor gasping that he can't breathe. So, the officers get to go home to their family, and the usual story happens where the protests start, and we either get to see a momentary justice where the officer's taken in, but of course they never really end up going to jail or anything like that, or we get not even any justice, not even a taste of justice, because they aren't even indicted or arrested. Well, this time around at this point, Officer Chauvin was taken in custody. He was arrested. I believe he's on $500,000 bail. I'm not sure if he made bail. Wouldn't surprise me if he did. But that happened after the protests that started the day, I believe it was the day after George Floyd died last Monday. They got a little violent. Some people describe it as riots. Certainly, I would say it transitioned from a peaceful protest to a different type of direct action. There were buildings that were looted, if that that's the term people like to use. That I think most people understand in terms of what happened. The word brings a lot of different connotations to it that I don't agree with. But we'll describe it as that so everyone follows along. And there were some buildings set on fire. I believe it was a Target that was looted. Right, a Target. Because now Targets have become like a symbol, apparently, where if there's a Target nearby a protest, they start boarding it up. Like they did at the Barclays Center last night. Target's across the street from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Boarded up when the protest started getting together. And, there's so much going on about these protests that, I've reached out to different people on the ground. And here's the thing. I have been doing this for about a decade. In terms of, I've obviously been into politics. Actually, I've been in politics since I was very young, preteen, thanks to punk rock. I started doing politics, out of college professionally about 10 years ago. And I didn't just look at, protests when I started covering them the same way I did as just someone who would go to protests as a high school student, a college student. You look at them a bit differently when you're covering them, and you get to understand all the intricacies of, grassroots action. And I will say, from what I've seen at, the anti-war protests under Bush, the Occupy protests, the protests when Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. It was the Million Hoodies March, I believe it was called. And then that sort of was the jump off into the Black Lives Matter movement when Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson. These protests are the same in some ways, but a bit different too. And where they're different is where I think how do I explain this? Where it's different, I think it's different because of the current situation we're in as a I can't even just say as a country, as an entire world, and just what's going on at the solidarity protests that are offshoots from the main protests where this happened in Minnesota. And what I mean is this. At all these other protests, when there was a Black Lives Matter protest in, 2015, 2016, what you would see is there would be, when there was a protest in relation to a police killing, what you would see is the main protests would obviously culminate where the police brutality, the police action, the police violence occurred. And then the solidarity protest would obviously be, they would be big sometimes, but you would never sort of see the same sort of action in terms of, you would see a march, some protesters going up against the police. But this time, you're seeing it get to the point of, cars being flipped over, buildings being burned, stores being broken into, all around the country. And I think that has a lot of people in power scared, to be quite frank. I mean, you could just see it with what they're saying, with what the message is in terms of just saying, you gotta go home. And they're rolling out whoever they could roll out to try to connect to whoever they think they could connect to tell them to stop going out there and protesting. And the reason I think this is what's happening, and it should be obvious to everyone, is that these protests are happening under the cloud of a fucking pandemic. I mean, it's almost, a little bit weird to me. Like it's like I see you go out there and you see the protests or you watch the videos of the protests, and it really is something else to see everyone wearing face masks. I don't mean just bandanas like you sometimes see people wear to hide their face during a protest so they don't get arrested or identified later on. I mean the medical masks. Everyone wearing some sort of face covering. The cops wearing face coverings. It's a bit dystopian. I mean, it's pretty crazy to see. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. But I mean, this happened. This man was killed, and people are angry. And I think, and I'm bringing up the coronavirus, not just as this, I think we're going to possibly see some real problems with this in terms of the protests and the coronavirus and it spreading at these protests. And I think we'll see it soon. And it's something that I'm worried about. And it's something that I think people are keeping in mind, obviously. But I don't know if enough of it has been on the forefront of people's minds. And the thing, though, that's been completely overlooked in a way, and I bring this up because there's so many aspects to this in terms of what happened to George Floyd, in terms of who's out there protesting, in terms of why it is how it is across the country. A little bit different than the previous protests for similar reasons. And, I don't know why this hasn't been covered more. But George Floyd lost his job because of the coronavirus. Now, I didn't mention earlier, but the man was arrested for apparently, this is allegedly what the police were called for. A grocery store clerk called the police claiming that George Floyd tried to pay with a forged $20 bill. I don't know if it's true. I mean, the idea that you would call the cops for a forged $20 bill, that seems to say a lot about how the store clerk viewed this black man. Because, I mean, my first thought, if I was working somewhere and I had service jobs when I was younger, if I received a $20 bill working at a grocery store that was fake or forged or whatever, a check or whatever, if I was saying bill, whatever it was, I would assume that this person was also had. I mean, this is a low sum of money. This isn't like someone trying to fake a couple, $100,000 check and cash it, or a $10,000 check and cash it, or even a $5,000, a couple $1,000. We're talking $20. My assumption would be this guy was fooled, and he's out $20. Sucks for him. I'm sorry, buddy. So there's a lot going on there. But George Floyd lost his job because of the coronavirus. I was reading that his family, an interview with his family, they were discussing how, he was trying to make ends meet. He lost his job. He worked multiple jobs. He was a bouncer at a club. He was a delivery driver, I believe, was one of the other jobs. And he lost them because of the coronavirus lockdowns. So whether this dude meant to try to cash this $20 bill at the grocery store, or whether he was duped and was fooled and lost and was out $20 himself, I mean, it's pretty clear the situation here is that you have a guy who is struggling because he is one of, 40 million? At least, because that's just who filed for unemployment, I believe, who have been failed by the government during a fucking pandemic. I mean, this has sort of been ignored in this. There is no doubt that there is a hardcore main component, which is George Floyd is a black man living in America. But if you're talking about these protests and not bringing up the coronavirus, I mean, this isn't the usual. I understand that there are people on the left who strongly believe that, and I believe this too, that class is a huge part of this. And I mean, and if you're truly an intersectional person, you realize this. But then there's also the liberals who believe that, if this even happens to rich black men, so money doesn't solve everything. I mean, they're completely missing the point in terms of the system that perpetuates it and who the cops are protecting and who white supremacy protects. But let's keep that story to the side for now. Whether you agree with either of those things, this is a completely different era. This isn't the usual income inequality. You can't talk about these protests and what's happening without bringing up the United States in a state of a pandemic. It is impossible. I don't see how you do it. You just think all of a sudden that these protests that have spread all across the country, all getting as passionate and violent as all the other ones, as the one in Minnesota where George Floyd was killed, you don't think that dynamic, which makes it different from the previous protests, from previous Black Lives Matter protests from previous years, you don't think that dynamic has anything to do with coronavirus? People have been locked up. Some lockdowns have ended. Obviously, my opinion is way too soon, but they've ended. Other lockdowns that are still going on, like in New York City, are on the brink of ending, June 8th, for New York right now. So people are enraged under the state they're currently living in. And I'm not talking about white people only. I could only, you could just see it from the crowds who are coming out. You have people who are upset and angry because they've been failed by the state. And when you take that main component, which is police violence against black people, I mean, then this is what you get. Because this is a dynamic I'm seeing online right now. And I guess we could get to talking about this because this is really enraging me about the outside agitator. So you have one of the mayors of Minnesota. Was it the mayor of Minneapolis? I'm not sure, but one of the mayors of a major city in Minnesota. And the governor of Minnesota coming out today. Well, first, that mayor I'm talking about, he comes out today and says, those protesters who were arrested last night, I'm told they're all from out of state. And of course, people run with that. Oh, outside agitators. Of course, the real protesters who have the real grievances were just trying to peacefully protest. And I'm sure there were many who were just trying to peacefully protest. But I assure you, not all of them. And then you have people running with that. Now notice what he says is, I'm told. Because that's the tell there. He can't tell you the actual facts, even though he could have waited to find out, because as the mayor of a city in Minnesota, he should be able to verify that information. And by he should be able to, I mean like he has access to do so very easily. And so people run with that. And then literally right after him, the governor of Minnesota comes up. And he goes that he estimates. Look at that word now too. He's not saying he knows or he has the details or the data or the statistics. He estimates that about 80% of people who were arrested last night are coming from out of state. Outside agitators. Not legitimate protesters with actual grievances. Now, notice that along with the estimate to protect himself again, because he can't verify this. The governor of Minnesota can't verify how many people were arrested in Minnesota at the protests who lived in Minnesota. Can't verify that information, even though the police have that information. Notice, though, that he automatically, just by saying what he said, still 80% high number, but it right away, like that, refutes what the mayor who's talked right before him said. We went from, I've been told, every single person arrested last night was an outside agitator. And then same conference. Shifted from 100% of everyone to maybe 80%. And now, what you get is some information has come through with the actual stats. Because there's jail records that are public. And if you look, of the 45 people who were arrested for rioting, unlawful assembly, stolen property, burglary, or robbery, on May 29th and May 30th so far, 38 of them, 38 out of 45, had Minnesota addresses. So, your outside agitators go from 100% to 80% to 38 out of 45. What is that? 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. So 7 people from out of state. And who knows? Maybe they were college students back home. They had an address from their college dorm. Now they're back home because the school's closed. We don't know. Or maybe they're from the state next door. You know, there's a lot of major cities that are right there on the border where east to west from a state, 8 hours. But then the neighborhood, the neighboring state next door to that city, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. You can consider them outside agitators, but the other people not? I mean, the idea that it's outside agitators doing this. Oh, now I've talked about this. I went on this rant on Twitter earlier today, and I had people coming out saying, well, we see the video clips of a bunch of white people in black neighborhoods. Okay. There's a lot going on here. Number one, did I say that outside agitators? I hate that term. Do I say that there are not people just looking to cause trouble? Of course there are. It's a protest. You're not going to get a perfect protest. It's the very idea of a protest. And you don't really understand that. Because that was me probably 12, 13 years ago. When you would see someone purposely trying to cause trouble at a protest and be like, not fair, they're ruining our peaceful protest. I'm sorry, that's what a protest is. There's no rules. What are you gonna whip out, throw the law book at them? What? What's the rules of a peaceful protest that isn't sanctioned by the state? None of these protests have permits. So yeah, the very idea of holding an impromptu protest means you're going to get people who are just looking to do whatever. They too can be doing it out of anger, just not knowing where to show it, how to show it. I mean, this is hard to believe if you're someone on political Twitter who thinks everyone in the world is just as woke as you are because you're in a bubble. People do things without understanding why. There's a lot of people out there who don't understand the politics of the situation. People who think they're apolitical and have feelings towards things. and don't know how to properly, who don't know the term is direct action. Who don't know the proper ways to peacefully protest. I mean, it's you're not going to get people at a protest like this working together in the way you want them to. That's one of the drawbacks of a leaderless protest, a leaderless movement. I mean, this happened to Occupy. This did happen to BLM protests earlier on. I mean, you can't control who comes out to these things, especially if there are no leaders for the media or for your state leaders, your government leaders to point to as the point of reference when they want to address the protests. It's just part of this. I'm sorry. And, if you're a protester on the ground and you see someone doing something you don't like them doing, and you yell at them, tell them to stop, you just talk with them, I mean, that's also part of a protest. You do try to, get people around you. You try to wrangle people, try to protect people. You don't want someone, a lot of times people are looking out for other people as well as themselves and their communities, obviously. But, that's something that you do on the ground. That's something that's meant for the protesters. That's not for you to sit on in your computer chair at home and Monday morning quarterback the people on the ground. I mean, what does that accomplish? I mean, those people showed up and you're sitting on your chair saying, poo-pooing on the people who were down there, putting bodies on the line. And I'm talking black, brown, white, LGBT, native, immigrant. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I get it. I was there. I remember seeing when I was younger, a protest go bad and the media changing the narrative because of a protest that went bad, quote unquote, I should say, in terms of, I'm talking now in terms of how it'll be covered by the media and how the government, your state, federal government will try to classify the protests. I mean, you could sit and knock these people, but you don't get it till you're down there. You don't get it till the police are ramming their bike into you. You don't get it till the police are shooting rubber bullets at you. You don't get it until the police are throwing smoke at you. You don't get it. I mean, maybe not everyone is as restrained as you are. Power to you for being like that. I mean, it's just, and again, if you're on the ground and you want to try to do something about it, I totally get it. That's part of these ground protests, trying to get people to work together and do things and stop actions that are being deemed by the people on the ground as harmful. I get that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are sitting on their computer right now, typing outside agitators, Russia's doing this, Russia's fomenting divisiveness in the country. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to shed your liberal Alex Jones-esque conspiracy theories, and you're basically poo-pooing anyone who has the audacity to go down there and actually take action while you're sitting at home on your computer or on your phone. You don't get to do that. I mean, you get to do that in terms of no one can stop you, but I'm not going to take you seriously. And I think anyone who understands how protests actually work and have been part of any actual movement for the past 5, 10, 15 years or whatever aren't going to take you seriously. I'm sorry that Donald Trump woke you up to the realities of the country that existed before Donald Trump, but the shit didn't exist before Donald Trump, and you didn't do the reading, so you don't get to talk about all this shit like it just happened, and you have no reference to anything before Trump, so you think, someone's breaking a window, or police are getting attacked because they actually struck first, but I'm not gonna look at that as in any shape or form, and I'm just gonna pretend that it's these evil Antifa leftist protesters are wrong, even though I'm feeding right into the right wing tropes that Trump is pushing and alt-right is pushing and all your least favorite people who you claim to hate are pushing, but you're gonna feed into that shit. You're gonna give them more ammo by saying it's the left or it's the alt left or it's Antifa, even though if you ask someone on the ground at any of these protests, you ask the priests and the pastors down at Charlottesville when they were straight up looking in the eyes of both the police and neo-Nazis and fascists who stood up for them and who put their bodies on the line to help protect them. It was Antifa. But no, we're going to pretend that that's not what you hear from people on the ground. We're going to sit home in a computer chair and say, oh, we see a bunch of white people throwing shit through a window in this one clip I'm looking at, this one cherry-picked clip. And I'm going to assume that it's outside agitators behind all this. And no one who is actually out there for the actual protests, the actual reason why people are out there, because a police officer murdered George Floyd. We're going to pretend no one out there is angry like that. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. I mean, it's ridiculous to me that they don't see what they're doing online because it's coming right to them what they're doing. I can't tell you how many big liberal accounts I've seen. And I'm talking white liberals, I'm talking black liberals, I'm talking brown, I'm talking all liberals. I've seen this from them all. The people who don't necessarily partake in grassroots action. The ones who jump into your replies to say, if you don't like it, what's going on? You gotta vote. As if things were not being protested. As if black bodies being murdered by the police state weren't being protested under a Democratic president. I've seen those people tweet this stuff about Antifa. And then what do you see in the replies right under? You see the MAGA accounts jumping in saying, that's right. Glad to see you finally see it. Paid for by George Soros. Feeding into anti-Semitic tropes because they don't know what's going on there on the ground. Of course there's some people just looking to cause trouble. And of course there's people who aren't looking to cause trouble. But when they are met baton to fist like they're being met, they can't control themselves because, again, they're not sitting in a computer chair at home. They're out there, face mask on, fending off from a coronavirus pandemic and from the police state. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, and let's just take this for a minute here. The idea that, like, we're talking hundreds of people are coming out here, thousands of people, and you see a clip of 3 dudes throwing a brick through a window. You can think that's wrong. I get it. You can think that's fine. I get it. You think those 3 people are fomenting all this stuff out there. And we already know from the stats here, and again, great podcast, citation needed, pointed out articles from previous protests over the years. Same narrative. Protest happens, gets a little violent, gets a little out of control. Governor, mayor, police chief comes out, says, outside agitators. It's so easy to do. You know why they do it, right? It's so easy. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You absolve yourself of any wrongdoing because these people aren't actually mad at us and our inaction or action because the people who were actually protesting against what they perceive our wrongdoing is, they were doing it peacefully because it wasn't that bad. It wasn't so wrong. It wasn't that bad. It's the outside agitators. They're just looking to cause trouble. They're bored, or they're looking to make some money. They're looking to steal shit. Nothing we could do about that. It's not our fault that those people came here and did that. Nothing we did caused that. And then number two, they blame outside agitators because it downplays the actual anger that people are feeling. Nothing to see here, folks. No one's actually angry. These are just thugs and hoodlums and, privileged white kids looking to cause some havoc. I mean, I saw a clip just earlier. Young people, really young. It wouldn't surprise me if they weren't young millennials. They might have been Gen Z. Talking like 18, 19, 20. Flipping over a cop car. I think it was in, where was it? in SLC, in Salt Lake City, right. You're going to get mad about white people marching in a Black Lives Matter rally in Salt Lake City. I mean, come on. But I saw a tweet getting mad that they were saying, oh, look at these white people flipping over a cop car in Salt Lake City. Our protest was peaceful. But then you look at the clip. And yeah, you see a couple white kids. See a couple of black kids too. I don't just see black men flipping over that car. I see a black woman flipping over that car too. And you know why? Not because they're bad. Because they've been wronged. And they're angry. And they don't know what to fucking do. Because they've been living under a fucking pandemic. And they're sick of seeing black people being murdered on the street. And it's all just rising. The anger and the frustration is rising. They don't know what's left to do. What do they do? What do you do? And I should point out that right before they flip over this car, a fucking guy shows up, a civilian, a fat white MAGA looking dude, comes out of his car with a friggin' bow and arrow and tries to shoot a protester with that. And you know what happened? You see that multiracial, multi-generational crowd ascend on that man and take him down. And then he was taken into custody. And they flipped over his car and burnt it too. I mean, you gotta be kidding me here. You're gonna police this shit and say you support what's going... What are you doing? Yeah, throw your own people under... And when I say your own people, I mean the people who are fighting alongside... And this is what's happening here. A lot of these white liberals who are tweeting this shit think that, oh, these aren't the good white. I'm the good white ally. Yeah, you sitting home, the good white ally. Those people putting their bodies in front of, the black and brown protesters they're marching alongside with. They're not the real allies, right? I mean, what is it that woke white liberals want? Truthfully, I'm trying to understand here. Do white people show solidarity by putting their bodies on the line at these protests? Or do they sit at home and not do anything? Like you guys are. But of course, you'll pretend you go out because when there's a nice pre-prepared protest with the proper permits, you go out there, put on your little pink hat, and everything's fine. You're one protest a year. I mean, I don't understand what you want. I mean, I saw someone, and this was from a black liberal, or at least they portray themselves as a black liberal. Someone pointed out they're an anonymous person on Twitter who puts forth that they're black, but they showed me some stuff that suggests That might not be the case from how the account was prior to it becoming this account that's now pushing out this stuff. But so let's not, this liberal account, because we don't know, used their criticism of the white people protesting alongside the black people at the Black Lives Matter protests to post a picture of Bernie Sanders. Why post? I don't even get it. But post a picture of Bernie Sanders getting arrested in Chicago for protesting segregated college university dorms, to attack that action. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of things to criticize Bernie Sanders for, even though he's my guy in the primaries. He's who I supported. I like Bernie Sanders. I think he's one of the best politicians we got. Low bar, but I respect the guy and what he's done. A lot to criticize, though. But his racial justice action that he took in the 60s, I don't get why that became such a knock on him. But I mean, what is it? So Bernie Sanders was wrong for being a college student who chained himself to a black woman to protest segregation in the 60s. He was wrong for doing that. Okay, but so what was he supposed to do? I don't, it really is like fucking insane sometimes. And no doubt about it. There are white protesters who get out of hand in terms of endangering the people around them at some of these actions. But the protesters on the ground deal with it. You see it in the clips. They're dealt with. It's fixed. They take care of it on their own. They don't need you Monday morning quarterbacking it, turning it into a whole thing, which then becomes the narrative, which then Trump tweets out earlier today, all this violence is from Antifa and the left. Because you lobbied it up for him. You gave him the perfect serve. It's really enraging. I don't know what else to say about it other than, I mean, you're complicit in helping the right. I mean, that's just facts. And there's these stories about different far right white supremacist movements infiltrating these protests. And I've seen it. You could see some of this happening. And we should be aware of it. And I'll be covering that more because after all, this is one of the main topics of Doomed, covering white supremacy and the far right. But, and again, this is coming from someone who covers these guys. They don't have the numbers to do what you're seeing. They don't. You are taking away the agency from the angry, righteous protesters who are on the ground, who simply have a difference in opinion of what direct action they should take. A lot of this is generational. I mean, when you look at some of these clips, I mean, there's that clip from the other day in Georgia where you see black and white protesters standing on top of the graffitied CNN logo at CNN headquarters. You gonna tell me that was white agitators forcing those black protesters to do that? And that the black protesters had no idea what they were doing? I would say, how dare you do that to those black men who had every, reason And they had an agency of their own to go do that because they wanted to. They weren't duped. They weren't forced. I mean, I can tell you how empowering that must have felt to do that. To feel like the boot isn't on you for once. And again, I can't stress how different this is than any other time. Because the health concerns, the social concerns, the economic concerns are all bearing down out of this coronavirus cloud. While the police violence against black people storm is brewing below it. I mean, I don't have any of this prepared, so if some of these analogies are corny, that's what they are. I'm sorry. Just what's popping in my head at this moment. I'm like, really, really upset about how this is being covered. Because I think it does real harm to the people who are doing the work on the ground, who are fighting the fight on the ground, who are putting themselves on the line, not just physically to the police, but their health, literally. I mean, do not be surprised if you find out some of these protesters die, or a family member, which is extra sad if that happens. Someone, they have it and didn't even know and gave it to a family member. And of course, I'm talking how this will mostly affect, working people of color. Like it already has. I mean, listen, before doing this show tonight, I tried to get on some people, actually. And again, I've covered protests before, but what makes this so different is that this has been a non-stop thing. Like these aren't protest in one spot one night, protest another spot another night. Like these are continued protests in these cities, and they're almost around the clock. Like they're the people dispersing in the early mornings. I'm guessing just to get food and rest, and they're not showing up the next night. They're showing up the next day, 2-3 o'clock. So I'm working on talking to some people. I'm going to do more episodes about this. Yeah, I really think so much of it is a generational thing. Funny enough, just like how the primaries were. But you're really seeing a multiracial group of really young people out there. And they're taking part in these actions together. And I mean, you see it in studies how people. I really do think my millennial generation, and this includes some of them, who think more like the Gen Z kids, but I do think millennials are the last to look at this as a separate space type thing. Like some older protesters. And when I say older, I mean older millennial, Gen X, and above protesters. Because Gen Z looks at these issues completely different. And when I say, and I mean black, brown, white, native, Gen Z. Look at these issues. There's been studies, very different. And I think they view this different. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot with this generational divide with policing the protests. Protesters policing the protests. older people telling protesters how they should behave or act, and younger people saying, no, we want to do it this way. I mean, I still don't get how older people don't understand. And again, when I say older, I mean even some older millennials, but Gen X up. I don't get how they don't understand how millennials and Gen Z view the world. It baffles me. It takes 5 minutes even just to take a look at what these generations have gone through and how their anger is intersectional in every single way, and they view it that way. Talk to them and they view it that way. It's, yeah. We'll be talking about this more. I'm gonna do more episodes. I'm gonna try to ramp up. I did the last episode last week. Then this all happened with the police killing and the protests. And I tried to put some shows together. I was inundated with information and getting things together. And I'm working on other things too, involving news and getting this stuff out there that are also part of this media thing that I'm doing that you all help me do. But yeah. Folks, to support this show and help me grow it, go to patreon.com/MattBinder. We finally hit the goal. I have 100 patrons. I cannot thank you all enough. We're about to hit the first of the month. I will undoubtedly, as I always do the first of the month, and I think a lot of people do the first of the month, lose a few patrons, which means we'll fall under that goal again. If you can afford to become a subscriber to this show, go to patreon.com/MattBinder. I hope you enjoy these rare one-off me just talking to you shows, but normally I have a guest on. We get great guests on this show. You help make this show possible, and also you fund the second half of the show, which is just for patrons. I mean, I'm one of the few, there's only there's tons of leftist and political podcasts out there. There's only a handful of regular streaming shows out there. And I try to be one of them. And I am one of them. And it's because of all you. And, like I always say too, especially during this pandemic, if you can't afford to do so, I totally 100% get it. You can support this show without spending a dime by subscribing to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/MattBinder. You can also follow me on Twitter at MattBinder. Instagram, which I'm starting to use a little bit more, at MattBinder. Pretty much everywhere, just search MattBinder and you will find me. DoomedPod.com for the audio version of this show. Tell your favorite YouTuber, podcaster, you want to see me on their show. Tell me who your favorite YouTuber or podcaster is, and I'll get them on this show. You could drop a super chat if you want to drop a super chat in the YouTube live stream, youtube.com/MattBinder. It's a one-off monetary donation. Renee just dropped one. Renee says, plus, Trump using Twitter for provocation, taunting the uprising/revolution, i.e. Antifa Black Bloc, hashtag Matapacos USA. Thanks, Renee. I'm going to open the phone lines for the second half. Jump on Skype and call me at Doomed Live. And I will get to your call. We'll do a shorter, not a shorter, but usually I give you guys like literally double the amount of member stuff. But try to keep the member show as at the normal length today. It's already 11:30, but it's a lot going on. I'm trying to keep you guys, up to date in terms of my opinion on some of this stuff, at the very least. And now, before I say goodbye to the first half of the show, I want to shout out each and every one of my 100 patrons. Oh, let me really quickly. Now, when I first put the goal together, I said when I hit the goal, I would start doing a members-only show. But then it took longer to hit the goal than I expected. That fault is at me because I'm a terrible marketer. Can't promote my own shit for the life of me. What was I saying? Right. So I started doing the patron only show way before I hit the goal. But now that I hit the goal, I'm going to use it to force myself to do those one-off YouTube clips that I said I was going to do. And I think I've done a few, one or two. But I hit the goal, so now you guys are holding me now to doing more. I'm going to try to do a few a month. Maybe once a week at the very least. If I can do that many. But I'm holding myself to at least a few a month. I think that'll help grow the show, give you guys shareable content. All right. Skype, Doomed Live. Give me a call. I'll take you in the second half of the show. For you first halfers. Oh my God, what's going on, man? A lot of shit going on. I'm following these protests in real time as window broken at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. Let me pull out a tiny violin. All right, folks. See you all next time on Doomed. Oh, wait. Jumping back in here. I forgot to shout out the patrons by name. Let me do that right now. Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Amanda H, Andrew C, Andrew H, Angela, Ari, Baka, Ben, Benji, Bobby M, Brian S, Brosnan, Champagne Kami, Chris F, Christine H, Cindy G, Colin R, Connor R, Cracker Barrel, CT, Cyber Snowstorm, Cynthia J, D, Dan K, Dank Uger, Dave K, David Z, Daya, Douglas V, Dragon Slayer, Eugene B, Fraz K, Free Hat, FTW, Graham C, Greywind, Greg D, Greg... Oh my, there's two Greg Ds. Greg D with 1 G, Greg D with 2 Gs. Oh, we got a call coming in. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to take it. Hello?
Hello? Did you see the troll that we had in the chat? He thought we were all liberals.
Hold on 1 second. Let me finish reading the patrons, and then we'll jump in the second half and do this call. Hold on for 1 second.
Okay, don't forget Zoe.
I won't. Just stay on the line. I'll leave you there and just mute you. So Greg D with 1 G, Greg D with 2 Gs, Grim, Hitesh, Igor, Jack D, Jacob W, Jameson, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeremy M, JLS, John B, John S, Jonathan B, Joseph H, Joseph R, Joyce M, Justin S, Katie S, Kaushal, Lisa D, Mariah, Mark S, Maddie, Max W, me, Melissa M, Mitch, Michael B, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Dinks, NS, Nicole A, Nam Danet, No Style, Odeth, Paul M, Penelope, Qster, Rad Dad, Remy, Ryan, Scott R, Seth K, Sean H, Sheena, Silicon Baby, Stephen R, Stephen S, Steve A, TM, Tammy G, Terrence R, Hypervisor, This Is Not Pizza, Tina M, Tom M, Why That Tie Guy, Utopian, and Zoe. All right, see you all next time on Doomed. All right, now we're back. And what's up, buddy? How you doing?
Great. Proud of you guys over in the United States that finally decided to go on board with us.
All right, right. Where you coming from again? So everyone knows.
Santiago, Chile.
Well, I know where you're coming from, Renee, but you're talking to
Anybody else?
yes, you're talking to an audience that might be unfamiliar with who you are. So I need to
I'm
introduce
pretty,
you.
I'm pretty notorious on here, and I usually every now
Just
and then say where I'm from.
just
I know
never
it's a
know,
little
man. You never know.
exposure.
First time listener, who knows? They're jumping in and they're just hearing you saying thanks for joining us, and they're going, "What? Who joining? Who? Where? Who's joining what?"
Well, yeah, we do have a fast troll in the chat that kind of confused us with the La Resistance.
Oh, what were they saying? I missed it.
They confused they confused us with liberals and the resistance. In
Oh,
fact,
they
we
always do
both
that. They always do
supported.
it. It's so funny how, the far right, they can never tell the difference between a Democrat and a leftist. Like a generic moderate Democrat, a centrist, a liberal, and a leftist. They can never, they don't know, like you think paying attention this long and these people are your enemies, you would somehow know the differences between each so you could properly prepare for taking on each one. None of them seem to do the work. None of them seem to understand the difference between a leftist and a liberal.
Yeah, but at the same time, you thought that we also supported Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin. I don't know how you can make that square though.
All right. Well,
Right, right. You saw like Curvas Politicas Montserrat's Twitter account.
yeah, is she stateside?
Oh yeah, that's why it was so easy the communication because she was like in New York the other time. She sort of like bounces back and forth, but she was like commenting how since Bolsonaro and all that, it's impossible to get a plane over to Brazil and from there to Chile.
Where in the U.S. is she right now?
New York.
Oh, she's in New
She
York.
just yeah, you should get her on next time because she was at the protests in Brooklyn. In fact, she was like chanting anti-Piñera, Pinochet chants that I don't think the NYPD would understand.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah, but it's kind of
Maybe,
like
maybe I should do a try to get down to one of the protests and do a show from there and meet up with her and we could do an episode.
right a double coverage out in the sun.
Yeah, it would be a no brainer if it wasn't for the pandemic. I'm a little bit cautious about that right now because of
No,
you know
I understand that. That's the same problem over here in Chile about people calling for protesting and things like that, and people have done because, of course, out of hunger. I mean, I posted the other day on various media like a kind of a meme that because Pinera had given like a box of supplies, but it was very meager, and of course it was like outsourced to one of his buddies and things like that.
right.
So people out of desperation are thinking of I think they already had a protest and they stormed someplace and that kind of like got the ball moving out in one of the outlying suburbs here in Santiago and working class neighborhoods.
Right, right. I mean, the issue with me, is, you never know with this, but my real worry would be getting someone else sick, whether it be a family member or a stranger, more so than my
Yeah, of
own,
course.
more so than my own self. I mean, who knows how my body would handle it? I could be being a little bit too confident, saying I'm a healthy young guy who can probably deal with it if I even am symptomatic. But that's not the issue really.
Well, basically, the funny thing is that there's also like a parallel between like dressing like riot culture and dressing up for COVID-19. But still, yeah, I mean, I recently saw an ad for, as I was telling Grim, that I saw an ad on Facebook for like these overalls that are like enclosed almost like hazmat suits. But of course, if there was like a hazmat suit, I'd be protesting already.
Right. Right. I mean, that's that. I
But
mean,
that's a possibility, though.
and of course, it's getting hot here. I know down there you guys are approaching winter soon, right? But
Well, yeah, but we all dressed up for bear when it was like hot in the
right,
summertime.
it's like rough to do body head to toe covering when it's 80, 90 degrees out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but necessary in this case, I suppose.
Right. But I mean, there's be necessary, and then you're on the street in this heat. You'll pass out if you don't if you
Right.
don't take care of yourself.
I've,
Right.
I've heard that there's people like going in sandals and everything,
Right.
even though broken glass and things like that. That's better not to. And as I was saying on the super chat, there's like a well, I said it. I tried sending it before, but yeah, there's a lot of like parallels in discourse and in tactics because of course the United States sent like U.S. military training from it via Israel and here in the military base that they established for interurban fighting here in Chile in the seaside near Santiago called Cancun.
Ah.
And you see that you saw
How is how is
the
how is
the
how?
agent provocateur,
What was that?
the guy with the umbrella, the agent provocateur.
Oh yes, yes, yes. In what was that? It was in Minnesota.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to comment
I
on
mean,
that.
I don't. I, people pegged him as a cop, and they pulled out a specific individual cop and started spreading a photo and alleged text messages from his ex-wife confirming it was him. But no one found the source of that and confirmed it. And I also then saw a reporter saying how they reached out to the police and the police said that's not their guy, which also obviously you can't use that as a source either. You can't that's not. I mean, you literally need to confirm that it was him through literally finding out if it was him through your own means, not through secondhand text messages where you can't even find the original source, or the police telling you that, oh no, it's not my police officer. I mean, we literally do
Well,
not
they
know who that.
showed
We literally
they
don't know who
showed
that person is.
photographs.
We don't
They
know who
showed
that person
photographs
is.
side by side though, and it was very similar to the guy.
Yeah, but these photographs are at an angle and the lighting is that you can't compare the two. It's just not possible. I'm
No,
sorry.
the guy confronted somebody like face on. That's where he blew it.
I've seen the side by side photo, and there's a whole new one out there, it's. I mean, do they look similar? Of course, yeah, no doubt. But I mean, that's not enough. You really can't go by that. You need to really confirm that shit. You can't just. I
But
mean,
but it's a
that's a
notorious
problem. That's a
it's a
problem.
notorious tactic though.
Right, right, right. And I'm sure there are police doing it, but we don't know if that's one of the police officers that did it. I mean, we don't know who that guy is. That guy could have been a right wing guy. Guy could have been just a guy out to who no connection to anything, who just saw it as an opportunity to fucking break some shit.
I guess the closest alternative would be a right wing guy, an extreme right wing guy that works with the police, kind of like
I mean, it's
even
possible,
more
but we
so
don't.
than Zimmerman.
Listen, I think a real problem is when we start speculating in the same way that conspiracy theorists on the right do. It's not helpful at all. A lot of
Not
times, to debunk that shit though, liberals
not the
go.
same not yeah not the same way as Moon Logic though, because it's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's helpful to. I mean, you want to speculate and make it clear that this is pure speculation. That's totally different. That's just you shooting the shit. I mean, that's what that's for. But I don't think people should be spreading that shit around as
Well,
this
yeah, I
is.
guess the use of it would be like to be wary of such people
Like I saw people passing
and then
those.
possibly citizen arrests
Like I saw people,
potentially.
I saw people post it, spreading those text messages around saying, "Well, it's been confirmed." Like I saw people with blue checks verified on Twitter sharing that shit around, going, "Well, it's been confirmed. Ex-wife says so. just because there's a text message screenshot of someone who's claiming to be his ex-wife, where you don't even know where these text message screenshots came from. I mean, we just don't know. Unless you find out, you're not gonna. I mean, as far as I know, there's been no connection to where those came from either. So we don't know.
Well, here in Chile, they tried to stop people like that and like unmask them, like in mass, and even beat them up in order to reveal who they are and all that as a
Right.
tactic.
I think in this scenario, people get really emotional and they look for things to try to spread and share something to make them feel like they've accomplished something or did something. And a lot of times they didn't do anything. They're passing around something that's been unverified and unconfirmed, and it could turn out to be bullshit, and they're fucking up what's going on. Like it really, I think it's a detrimental to because we
Yeah, but
should.
at the same time, the important thing is that this was in tandem with the police shooting, like smoke canisters, in order to direct the protesters towards a certain area, so they would incite them into
Oh
looting
right,
or burning
right.
and
Listen,
stuff like that.
I'm no doubt saying this is happening, but we don't know if that specific guy was a police officer, nor do we know if he was that. I mean, do I think he was? Yes. But I wouldn't go out there sharing that saying, I confirm it's a police officer because I saw these text messages, or I feel like he is, or I saw these two separate shots from who knows how long ago one of those pictures are from, and their eyebrows sort of look the same. And it's just way too, circumstantial. It's not proof. It's just not proof.
Well, you
You
got to be wary about people like that and try to stop them and try to unmask
Oh
them
yeah, of course. If you want to
whenever
say it, if you want
possible.
to use it as just a warning, but if you're using that as a warning, you're not passing around that 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 photo claiming that he's some guy that you can't confirm he is. Like if you're using it as just a warning to be wary, you just share that video and say, this guy is very sketchy. Something's off about it. Watch out for people like this because they could be. I mean, we've confirmed previously that there have been agent provocateurs and all sorts of police trying to rile up the crowd and cause problems.
But
But we don't. We
the only clear way to do it is like to mask them then,
Right,
unless you
right. I
can
mean, I don't know
afford
why no
to
one
turn
grabbed
into the
that.
police.
I mean, someone should have grabbed his shit and pulled it down. I mean, if he was a police officer and tried to arrest you for doing it, then there you go. You know who he was. You know what I mean? Like, either he runs
Yeah,
away because he's trying to keep undercover, or he unmasks himself on his own. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's really the best way to handle that. If you think someone's like that, but then you also run the risk of pulling someone's mask down who's just a guy, and then you're you're doing something that's pretty fucked up to
no,
someone who.
it was heavily suspicious because he like walk calmly away, and umbrellas to protect from cameras and things like that, which
Right.
isn't a usual black bloc.
No,
Um,
Black Block sometimes tries to. I mean, honestly, when I first saw him, I was like, uh, his gear is a bit too clean and new for an
right.
Antifa. Again, there is no. And I mean, is it true that there is a subculture that seems to really sort of get attracted to the Antifa aesthetic? The punk rock subculture, things like that. Alternative sort of thing. Yeah,
Right.
yes, there's absolutely an overlap, but there is no Antifa uniform. There's no Antifa membership. So this guy could have been, and like I mean, there were obviously things that were weird that he was by himself doing that. Usually, when you see something like that, there's not just one guy in a hood going over and methodically breaking shit with a hammer like that. But again, it's all just speculation. Do I think he was sketchy and weird and possibly a cop? Yes. Can I confirm it in any way, shape, or form? No.
But
So I like.
that sounds like that's more your responsibility because you're a journalist in media.
Right. I don't think it's protesters' responsibility, but I think if you're sharing that shit and you're thinking you're doing well, you're doing good, I think you're not. I think you're doing. Uh, you're spreading misinformation, and I think that's bad. Um, I think it's harmful to, because then it gets to the point where, you're crying wolf in certain ways, and we won't know when someone is telling the truth about something. If there's just all this bullshit out there and we can't verify, there's just so much unverifiable. Um, I mean, I think it's, again, not a responsibility, but I think if you want to do good, I think it's important to, before retweeting shit, being careful. And obviously, even I have been like, oh, this shit looks legit. I've looked, and then I end up being wrong. It happens to everyone. But I
Well, what's the
think,
case? What's the case if he was paramilitary? What would be the difference?
what do you mean?
Well, what if he was like a patriot prayer or just in favor of the police, and he did that to encourage the police to favor the police, or
Well, because then you're just
helping out a friend in the
you're
police
you're
force?
I mean you're throwing garbage on like the fact that this stuff happens. Like, if you say that police do this shit, and then you go ahead and this big incident blows up and it turns out to be wrong, then I mean, again, it sucks that this is the case, but there's a narrative being formed here.
But if he's an extreme right winger, it would be the same case. It's like in defense of authoritarianism.
I mean, to people who are in the know, yes, to people who get what's going on, but to Joe Schmo opening up his newspaper or logging onto his Twitter account and who isn't plugged into the political world here, they don't see it that way. I'm sure. All these idiots tried to say this was a cop. It wasn't. It was some fucking Trump asshole. The cops get blamed for this shit, and they don't do anything like it. I mean, it muddies the water. You know what I mean? It's not helpful. That's for sure. I mean, we could argue whether it's harmful, but it's certainly not helpful.
But the problem is that basically, and you can ask several people in the chat, is that there is now a correlation to Trump assholes and the police, because Trump now is like talking directly for the police and like lobbying
Right, you and I
for
know
the
that.
police.
Right, you and I know that. Of course, you don't think that Trump's rhetoric has amped up some of these officers we've been seeing in their behavior? I mean, yeah, they've been doing this shit forever, but there's take a deeper look and you could definitely see there's a little bit more brazenness in terms of when they're doing it, how they're doing it. It's a little
Yeah,
bit
but I mean, I was referring also that he was like speaking directly to police unions and campaigning and saying, "I'll allow it, do this, do that."
right, right. Again, you can certainly spread the word that this is happening without shooting yourself in the foot by being wrong about a specific incident. Like, why ID this guy if you can't confirm it? Because honestly, if you ask me, saying, look at this sketchy ass behavior, cops are known for doing this shit to rile up protesters, does just as well as IDing the guy, if you ask me. However, IDing the guy and then being wrong about it harms the case that, hey, look, cops are doing this. If you just, in my opinion, this is my opinion.
For
Do,
instance,
do
here's
does it
doing
harm
that.
it? Does it harm it to me? No, because again, I'm really plugged in. I get that it was a fuck up and that it was someone didn't confirm something or misinformation was spread. But again, you're listen, maybe you didn't have to worry about this 10, 20, 30 years ago, but in this atmosphere where everything's being filmed and there's a social media narrative being formed by every single person who has an account, I mean, you have to be aware of this shit. Is it your responsibility? Again, no. But if you want to be helpful and you don't want to do harm, I mean, you unfortunately need to be aware of this. It's just the cards that are now dealt. I mean, the same way that live streaming and video and Twitter and Facebook and all this shit has been helpful, there's also extra hurdles to jump through that that maybe you didn't have to worry about previously, but you have to worry about now.
Yeah, but in the same that's like the same narrative saying like, don't encourage people with the talks of revolution. This is like a case by case matter,
Right?
and you have to
And
do it
again,
in increments.
and again, what I'm saying is, like you can't hold these people responsible because a lot of them don't even know. You know what I mean? But what I can do is inform people that I can't police what you're saying and doing, but I can give you knowledge that maybe if you really want to be helpful, you'll at least consider and try to learn from. And my true opinion to you is this misinformation is unhelpful. and it only muddies the waters, and it fans the flames of when the far right tries to say, "Oh, look, leftist bullshit. Look at this. This is untrue. Oh, this is." I mean, because when Mister Joe Schmo, who doesn't know what's going on, tries to find out what's going on, and he doesn't understand all the intricacies of the left and the right, and he reads one side and he reads the other, and he sees both sides spewing bullshit, he's gonna pull the whole "I don't know who to trust." Again,
Yeah, but that happens anyway. I mean, look at the troll
no.
in the chat.
Listen, you look at the overwhelming response to what's going on, and I think shockingly, people have been more receptive to the what's going on now than ever before. I mean, do you get your people who are yelling looter and terrible? This is a bunch of thugs and this is of course you get that.
There's people afraid of the violence, of course.
But I'm telling you, in my again, this is my own experience. I'm seeing a lot less of it though. I'm seeing a lot of people who have been saying that shit previously, being more receptive to what's going on, saying, I've seen people say, I mean, I guess what's left for them to do? I've seen them marching for years now. What's left for them to do? I mean, there's definitely a slow but steady change happening. I mean, you just see it. It's I mean, and I think you need to just be aware of those people. And again,
You saw Killer Mike's video?
yeah, I mean, what is I mean, I it's hard because I think he was wrong, but at the same time, how can I tell this black man from Atlanta that? I mean, it's his community, and this is how he feels. I mean, I think it was misplaced in terms of what his messaging was, but I'm not going to police what he's saying. All I can do is give you my opinion on it, and that's what it is. I mean,
but that's his,
if he was opining on a broader thing, that's a little bit different. I could criticize something he's saying about a broader, if he was criticizing a complete protest tactic or something, that's one thing. But he's specifically talking about his hometown and his community. It's a little bit, I don't agree with him. I totally, alongside the people who are thinking, who are knocking him for it. I don't know if I can do that though. I think it's. I mean, just last week I unloaded on someone for telling me while I'm in one of the hearts of the coronavirus pandemic, I unloaded on someone who said, the Democrats, you shit on them too much. They're doing a really good job, I think. I mean, how dare that guy tell me what's going on in my hometown? You know what I mean? It's sort of that dynamic.
Yeah, I remember, but at the same time, you were kind of fair of including, but I have these phones to pick with them.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, in the case of Killer Mike, his crux is that that basically his past condemned himself because at the end of the day he's an entrepreneur, and the whole shtick about being a rebel is just part of.
Oh, if you want to, I guess I was misunderstanding what you were saying. I guess I was looking at it as him being someone who is a very outspoken advocate for justice, and
right.
but in the aspect of who he is as an artist and a money making machine and a
No, not just that. Not just that. He owns businesses, the barber shop and all that. He
right.
used to sell drugs and everything like that, and he has like another, more of a social democrat, perhaps more geared towards capitalism and such.
Right. I mean, I think it's bizarre to me to see this sort of reaction when we see people whose businesses have been burned down. And they've said, like, there's that one guy at the Indian restaurant who said, I get it. This moment is more important than my restaurant. We could rebuild my restaurant. We can't bring back George Floyd. I mean, that's powerful shit. I mean, that's powerful. And so it
Right.
is weird to, you know, I mean, do I sympathize with people who, but also, first of all, I think it's, uh, in terms of violence against, private
Property.
property, whatever. If you could be violent to property, even, you know,
Right.
I
Or against
think
a corporation.
it's silly to be, in most cases, silly to target a small business or something like that. I mean, you should be taking out your outrage at the major corporations because they help, you know,
Well, it
create
was
the.
more specific than that because there was like distribution of goods among the community as well.
But also,
That's what made it different. That's what made it different from other
but
BLM
right,
protests and
right.
stuff
But
like that.
also
It
the
brought them
idea
together.
that, all these small businesses in the community, and I mean all communities that this is happening in, not just a black community. The idea that all
Right.
these small businesses are somehow there to benefit the community. Like, we don't know. There could have been a small business that could have been, sucking off the community like a parasite, hurting the people who are in the community. And people in that community finally like, fuck it, we're gonna show this asshole what's what. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know.
Well, locally, usually, if there's like a sense of community, um, people like that give a wide berth towards like here in Chile, they would like mark the smaller businesses and say we don't attack the people, we attack the big businesses, the corporations.
Right. I mean,
We don't mess with the pueblo.
right. I mean, listen, there's some shitty small business out there. Like, the idea that all small business is good is bullshit. I mean, I fall for that shit sometimes too, when just broadly talking about, you know, a small business with a, by community member. Like, listen, there's some shitty small business out there. There's a lot of small businesses that treat its workers like shit. I mean, I know a lot of
Right.
people who've worked for really terrible small business owners, like worse than your manager at a major corporation. Uh, but I mean, it's a lot of people are just like to put everything under one umbrella, sort of talk
Or paint with a
everything.
broad brush.
Yeah, yes. It's
Right.
what were you saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking of basically, yeah, but that's the difference that now there's more like strategies in play. Like there's more like of an intent. I don't know how is it going down like in Brooklyn what they managed to do. I know they occupied a precinct and there were like various clashes with the police, including the police trying to run down people
All right.
in Brooklyn.
There's some, in the chat they're talking about the idea of the importance of optics or whatever. I want to make it clear because it wasn't clear in the first half of the show. The idea of it being a protester's responsibility to care about the optics, I don't agree with. That's bullshit. You can't expect anything from the everyday, ordinary citizen who is just angry and showing and wanting their voice to be heard. There's no expectation. But what I'm saying is offering up constructive help without the addendum that they must do this. Nothing wrong with that. That's what I mean when caring about the optics. I mean, it's without a doubt part of this. You can't pretend it's not. The
Yeah, but
responsibility the
it's like
responsibility
having a
doesn't the responsibility doesn't fall at the protester though. But if we can help keep it in their mind so they can formulate how much they want to care about it, and some of them probably will care about it if you tell them, and some of them probably won't, and that's fine too. I mean, it just you need to just know the diversity of tactics here, and keep all this shit in mind, and let everyone use the tools that are available to them. You know what I mean?
yeah, there's also the intersectionality that you have like of course more conscious like people involved, like both Marxists and people just in general, occupied in social justice, and then there's like the lumpen proletariat that might have just have enough, like Tabak Shakur was mentioning.
All right. All right,
So
Renee. I think someone else wants to get on the line. We've been talking. We've been talking.
okay, I'll let them get in and go back to watching the show
All
now.
right, cool. Thanks for calling. This was really great. This was really good for real. We brought up some good points here, and I really appreciate it. Uh,
Okay,
take care, man. Stay safe. Talk to you soon again.
later on with Montserrat, we could discuss the
Yes, I do.
comparison with Chile and how Chile's doing now.
I do think there's something to doing something while she's here, though, in terms of on the ground.
Right. Okay.
I have to see the logistics of it tech wise too. But all right, cool. Got another call coming in. Talk to you later, man.
Okay.
Hey, what's going on, brother?
Hey, how you doing? What's your name? Where you calling from?
Leonard Sampson, coming from North Carolina.
How you doing?
Uh, 32 years. Yeah, 32 years around the sun.
Ah.
Doing pretty good, man. Just like, let me try to start with a little more comical note. I would love to put my camera on, but I feel like if I do that, it's gonna kill my connection. I'm like way out here in the definition of the cut.
Well, why don't you
But
why don't you do it so we can
on
put
like
a
a little
face,
bit.
if you don't mind. Why don't you do it so we put a face to
Okay,
the name, and then
sure,
if it's affecting it, we could cut it
absolutely.
off.
Let me see what happens here. There we
There we
go.
go. How you doing?
Is that coming in good? Okay,
Yeah,
brother.
it looks good to me, man.
Doing fine, cat. God, man. Oh, so like on a little bit of a lighter note, is we got some serious stuff. But like I said, I've been trying to get up in contact with you for like 7 years. Not like on anything serious. I've been
Seven
talking to you about
years.
politics and like just everything else. Well, a long time ago, I subscribed to Sam Cedar's show just on a whim. I saw one of his random videos,
Ah.
and I subscribed to his channel, and I didn't pay that much attention to it at first, right? But these videos kept popping up with this guy with scraggly hair and a mustache and a kind of goatee coming in. Exactly. And I would be
Right.
like, what? Who is this dude? Why did I even subscribe to this? Like, cause I wouldn't even watch the videos. That would just pop up in my. But I was like, you know what?
Right.
One day I said, screw it. I'm gonna click on it and I'm gonna watch it. And when I got to the end of the video, I said, wow, this is a dude that spends time just like what you were talking with Rain. You take time to actually work through and explain why you know what I mean, think
Oh,
what you
thank
do,
you.
and so, man, 7 years, huge fan.
I
I
really
appreciate all the
appreciate it.
hard work you've done.
Oh,
I
that
know it's not easy yet.
I really appreciate it. That's really, and let me tell you, you're making it sound like it's really hard to get a hold of me. Anyone can get a hold of me. I'm really, but really, I
I
really
guess it takes
appreciate
a
it.
moment. Yeah, I guess that's what it was in a roundabout way. I was like, I figured it'd be really important. It would have to be really important for this to. So I was watching your live stream earlier, and I seen you throw it up to the Skype, and I was like, oh, okay. I didn't even know that's how they're doing it these days.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm trying to. I actually need to do it like this more, where I take more calls via Skype because it enables people who've been trying to talk to me for 7 years to finally. So how
But don't
are
worry, I kept busy the entire time.
good, good. So how are things in North Carolina? Are there protests there, and how are they
So
going?
I started watching. So stuff started developing early this morning in Durham, and I couldn't help but notice that the local news stations, CBS 17, all them, actually did a really good, aggressive job of being on the streets, reporting and talking with the protesters. And it seemed like the journalists were pleading with the American public to, we're gonna have to deal with these issues, right? Regardless of what happens next, we're gonna have to deal with these issues. That's what the journalists kept coming to the same conclusions. But as the night went on and things started to get dark, it was almost as if people knew that this peaceful atmosphere was going to evaporate.
Right,
And you know, there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. And I think the biggest one is that pressure. I think that's the biggest reason why.
right. It's people I think are fed up about so much. And again, it's not to take away the point of these protests is that people are fed up about police really just wantonly killing black men across this country. And that obviously has been something that kicked off movements, protests, marches, actions for years. But I think, and I think a lot of liberals are bothered when this is brought up, but I think it's impossible to not bring it up because we're literally seeing the difference between these protests and previous protests. It's just like everything else just like weighing down on everyone on top of the main focal point. And I think it's just making people go, where do we turn when, like, listen, like, after a protest for a solidarity protest for Michael Brown during Ferguson in maybe New York or L.A. or Chicago, after a protest like that, these people had to then wake up in the morning and go back to work. Where are they going now? Where are they going now? I mean,
Very good
this
point.
this is a situation where there are so many factors, and to pretend there isn't during a pandemic like some people are doing is just mind-boggling. And it's like, I just don't get why, like, and with you said how like things start to change at night. Well, I mean, yeah, that's just what happens to everybody. Like, you could be sitting just in your house and you feel different at night. It's just like
That's
your
it.
body is
Senses
going
start
through.
becoming awake. You know what I mean? You start getting heightened. You start
Right.
paying
There's
attention to. You know what I mean?
different
It's dark.
chemicals
You don't know
or
what's out
yeah.
there.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can't
It's
sleep.
just like
Start getting tired and stuff too. You've been working all day.
right.
Um,
It's so like
you really gotta go to
imagine
sleep at some point. Yeah.
and it's easy to sit in your home and knock protest action or whatever. But until you're standing there and a cop is shoving his bike in your face and spraying your face with mace, I mean, what do you like? You think you're just gonna go home and go, oh, it had happened. I'm gonna remain calm and peaceful. Like, are there some people who could do that? Yeah, God bless them. Fantastic. You can have that sort of self control. I wish everyone did. If in a perfect world, I guess we would all be as perfect as you, right? For people who are saying they could do that. But there are a lot of people who just aren't gonna feel that way. And listen, yeah, of course, there's gonna be people out there who are just trying to fuck shit up. But that's a protest. Like that's the very nature of this. Like there's no rules to this shit. It's actually quite shocking that many people do this in unison to begin with, and that there are just a few people who go out of the boundaries of what that particular action at the time is. But I mean, that's just what it is. And I mean the idea that, and it's always some sort of whitewashing of past protests. Like they always bring up how, Martin Luther King was a peaceful protester. Well, yeah, but you think every single protester from the civil rights era was marching peacefully? I mean, no, there
There was a
were.
lot of organizing that
Yeah,
took place in order to make sure that happened and to understand, like, okay, there's certain things we got to do to pull back to protect our people because, if they don't necessarily know what they're signing up for, they need to be out. You know what I mean? They don't need to be on the front lines in that sense.
right,
So I see people getting caught up in the hype. I think that's what it is. There's some people that are out there right now because their back is against the wall. Somebody
right,
that they know's life is on the line, or his life has already been lost by this.
right. And Martin
Mhm.
Luther King. Martin Luther King. I mean, just from like my reading and my understanding, like, and from this was he wasn't just a peaceful protester. The guy was extremely smart and calculating about everything that he was like. He wasn't just peacefully protesting. He knew who he had to meet with, who he had to connect to, who in power he needed to. Like, they don't give him enough credit by just calling him a peaceful protester. Really,
Nope, they really don't. They
like
really don't.
it's like
They hit
saying
the right on the head.
right. It's like saying, like, I don't know, who's another, like, it's like saying I don't know,
Frederick Douglass is a good one. Frederick
yeah,
Douglass is a
there
good
you
one.
go. Thank
People
you,
like to
thank
just
you.
take little excerpts from, what I mean, his life. Some people like to think he's perfect, but like, I mean, I got stuff I'm gonna criticize him on first and foremost. But you know what I mean? That being said, like, there were some great things he wrote, and there was some more. I mean, his life was amazing. It was profound in a lot of ways, just like King's. Um, I, yeah, I can't help but think that like we can't let this moment be lost, and people understand the significance and the fact that we have to hold these people accountable that put us in this situation time and time and time again. That's how we keep getting back to this. Right? People don't want to pay attention to politics. This is how it ends up happening like this.
Right.
We got to step our game up.
And another thing too, I think, is did it take Trump for people to change their mind about this? Because the media
You know
wasn't
what? You made me
the
think of
media
something. Yeah, go
the
for it.
media wasn't quite covering this as like if these were happening under Obama, which I mean obviously there were protests and riots under Obama, but if this specific one where it's widespread at the same time all happening in major states across and major cities across the country, you know I can't imagine how they would cover it. But then you have the media who finally got a taste of what it's like to to be I guess when I say the media, obviously there's been independent media out there and also great individual journalists at corporate media too, who basically use that corporate media power to empower their own really good work. But what I'm saying is the Jake Tappers of the world, who
Yes, that's yeah,
who love to
right on the surface level.
right, who love to knock whenever someone is mean to the police or mean to a journalist, even though it's a Fox News journalist. I think even he, after seeing, I mean, he still does it every now and then, but even you see maybe a little bit of movement after witnessing a Donald Trump presidency. And I mean, again, I don't think Donald Trump is an aberration when it comes to the Republican Party. He's just more upfront about how they feel, but they've always been this way. But I guess it was that upfrontness that needed to be that was needed to at least show very comfortable, privileged white people that this is how it is for everybody else. This is how it is for black people. This is how it is for brown people. This is even how it is for poor white people. I mean, it's just how it is. I mean, again, it's not the same experience. Poor white
Curtain's been
people,
pulled back.
right? Poor white
Yeah.
people, and I an addendum too because I don't want people obviously misconstruing. Poor white people don't have the same experience as a black person, but there is class solidarity
close.
there, and right,
It's close.
it's closer than people think in some respects. Like, listen,
Me in Midlow, North Carolina, I will speak to that personally. That
right.
it's really close.
I think the best way I like to put it is a white person could be the most unlucky, downtrodden person on the face of the planet and have the most like this. We could be looking at the most unlucky human being in the world. Everything could go wrong for them, and they could be white. The only difference is though they probably didn't happen to them because their skin was white. It was other factors that happened to them. That's the difference. Whereas if it was a black,
one leg up over at least one other group of people in society.
right, exactly. But I think a lot of privileged, well-to-do white people like to pretend that poor white anger is completely misconstrued and not legitimate. When I think that's just them showing their inability to even understand the class dynamics of it. Because again, they'll never understand what it's like to be a black person in America, but also that rich white person is never going to understand what it's like to be a poor person, white or black, in America.
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago. I was riding home from work. I was working at a buffet restaurant, Golden Corral, as a matter of fact, and I was heading downhill. All of a sudden, this gray truck comes riding down, and they pull up right behind me. And they pull up behind me to pass me, but as they pull up, they just try to push their truck as close as they can towards my car and push me off the road. I actually, right, my tires ended up rolling off the road. The entire experience left me a bit thrown off until they passed by and I saw the Confederate flag in the window, and I was oh, okay, I know exactly what it is. It's normal.
Right.
It's just a Tuesday.
Right. Well, right, and that's listen, that's clear as day that that's. Without a doubt, there are racist white people who fuck them. Like, fuck them. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm not one of those people who think, like, if the Confederate flag waving deep down inside racist just had a bit more money, they'd be... No, they were true believers in white power. And those people, it doesn't matter how much money they have.
They got to want to change.
Right, that's who they are. Right. But again, like, there are people who... I think a lot of people in this country like to pretend that everyone knows what's going on and knows what's what. When really the majority of people really are not plugged in and really don't get what their frustrations are. I mean, I don't think it's any clearer than during the coronavirus, where people were lashing out at the lockdowns, when what they really should have been lashing out at was the government's inability to take care of them during the lockdown. Like, they literally wanted to put their bodies on the line, literally put their health. They were ready to die to get back to.
We got the tapes. We got them on tape. We got them on CNN. We got them on Fox News. We got them all saying this month after month, leading up into this.
Right. They were ready to die just to reopen up. These regular people just can't let the economy. What does the economy do for you? Like, are you like a wealthy person and you want your workers to get back to work? If that's the case, then I get it. You're a piece of shit asshole, but I get it. But if you're just like what if you're just a regular, minimum wage or even like low to middle class person, what are you revving up to go back to work to put your health on the line for? I mean, what you should be protesting is that the government, like governments outside of like other governments in Europe and elsewhere did for their people, you should have been protesting for your government to take better care of you, provide money and food and basic necessities, not to reopen up to put your bodies on the line. I mean,
I think that's one of the reasons we're getting so much support from the international community, actually, with Floyd's killing. Because like they're looking at this whole situation and they're going like, these people are our friends, like not the government. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, the government is diametrically opposed to a lot of safety and security in the world, right? Not everybody in the government, but the people here, they're just stuck in the situation like anybody else is stuck in the situation. Right. So they're trying to help us get through this. I see that. I see the love that they're sending us, and I appreciate that.
Right. I think there's.
Goodness gracious, I do.
I mean, I think that I think especially with the younger generations, they're understanding more so about the solidarity across borders with people of the same means. I mean, you like Arab Spring protester in uprising against their government because they're not allowed to congregate and let their voice be heard. They have a lot in common with the Black Lives Matter movement here. They have, I mean, it's
Brazil.
and Brazil, what's going
on?
Look at, it couldn't be more obvious than with what happened since 2015 and 2016 with the rise of the far right around the world, where Brexit, Trump, Bolsonaro, different right-wing governments across the globe sort of came to power. You have the ones that were already in power, like Netanyahu in Israel, feeling even more empowered. Like the idea, and like the idea that the people all across the world don't have a similar, a shared experience, because it might not be similar, it might not be the exact same, but it's certainly a shared experience. Like the idea that the Palestinians are living under occupation, and people in Flint, Michigan don't have water, clean water, and and the Palestinians, because they're living under occupation, can't get access to a lot of necessities. I mean, there's some real solidarity there. There's no reason why there shouldn't be a movement that, and we see it happens, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be happening in terms of people across the world understanding it. The right did it. The right didn't even need to be that organized to do it. It wasn't like, it wasn't
funny.
Right. It wasn't like, it wasn't like Donald Trump, Bolsonaro, Nigel of the Brexiters.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage of Brexit, and all these guys got into a room together and plotted out. Nah, really, all they needed was one, ugly asshole in Steve Bannon going around. And it's not like Steve Bannon's some sort of mastermind either. He just went around and basically was like, all right, I got some fucking idiots. I got some fucking idiots who follow me. We're going to use the internet.
Alex Jones has got a bit to this in the United States. Have you watched those deposition tapes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Listen, Alex Jones is, I don't even know where to fit him into it, because in so many ways I think he's just like, like obviously he's done harm because what he's done to Sandy Hook family is torturing them with conspiracy theories and having people
Absolutely.
actually go and harass them is horrible, obviously. But
I met a young man the other day who he's been a good friend of mine for years, but he opened up and he told me that his family growing up, he's in his early 20s. His family growing up, they did not get their news from CNN. They did not get it from Fox. They didn't get it from MSNBC. They got it straight from InfoWars.
like that's
And
that's pretty interesting to me actually.
he says he's terrified of everything. And he's starting trying to work himself out of this. You know what I mean?
Right.
And realize that he can't trust certain people and certain things. And
This
I
is
can only
this is
imagine
a friend of
he's like
yours?
11. Yeah. He's a great friend of mine. He's a writer. He's aspiring. He's working on a comic book series.
You want?
Um,
I'd love to talk to him actually, if that's a possibility.
oh, absolutely. I can set it up tonight, or I can get it. Let me see what he's up to right now.
No, let's actually make it. I want to make it a separate. That sounds like something that should be an episode. I would love to like have an
Oh,
episode where we focus on
he
like.
would be honored.
So that would be
He
fantastic.
would be honored.
I
Okay,
mean,
no problem.
because I've heard of people falling into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole of YouTube and the all these other far right conspiracies and the platforms that they use, but I am the experience of an entire family consuming it as they would cable television or local news is something that I don't think is as common as I don't think I've ever heard a specific scenario quite like that. That's quite something.
He. I'm telling you, man. And you know what? As a matter of fact, this whole situation with George Floyd's killing is messing with him because he's got friends, he's got people that are on all sorts of different networks and areas, but he grew up in that city, in town, and he doesn't live there anymore. You know what I mean? But it's kind of like he wants to support the movement, but at the same time, people are trying to put them hooks in him again. You know what I mean? Trying to draw him
Right.
back in, try to focus on the surface level stuff of things. So he would enjoy this conversation immensely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So how is it though in North Carolina in terms of where it's headed? Because you are in one of those.
Last I checked, they was telling people to run for their lives because they were shooting with bullets.
Wow.
They were saying the cops were shooting with bullets. I saw that about 12 o'clock.
Politics wise, in terms of the general public though, because you are in one of one of the rare swing states to me that is actually a swing state. Like people like to say Florida's a swing state. Florida's not a swing state. Florida is a right wing red state. It's gonna be like that. Florida is lost. Anyone who thinks it's a swing state is ridiculous. Florida. I mean, how are you going to say that the one state where old white people have all been moving to is suddenly becoming a more blue? It's not happening. If anything, it's the one state that is without a doubt getting the exact demographic that is going to push it further and further right. In the same aspect, anyone who thinks Colorado is a swing state is, or even Nevada, I think is out of their mind because clearly those states are now pretty much forever blue. If you ask me, I mean, you're not going. I mean, I think there's very few actual swing states, and it's probably Arizona, North Carolina, obviously, Pennsylvania, just to
Yep.
name a few. Those are the ones that actually can go
North
either way.
Carolina's probably already blue if it's not like the voter suppression is real. You know what I mean? Like you saw how they got popped in that last election.
Right.
That one Republican candidate down here.
Right.
There's been all sorts of fishy stuff out here over the years, man. Like for
Right.
a long time, it was like that stuff Trump was talking about. He's projecting like, oh, they just do whatever they want to do. He's saying that because it comes from a certain place that he knows this. He knows about stuff that went down back in the day in some of these places out here in the South. Stuff in ballot boxes and whatnot, and that kind of ridiculous. It's almost antiquated to a certain extent, but
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so, because I don't like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't like feeding into stuff without, you know what I mean, having a true, like, because like you were talking with Rain earlier, it's so important to be consistent and be accountable, even to each other, right?
Right.
So if we're not doing that, then we can't expect, you know what I mean, people to take us serious when we're trying to speak truth to power.
Right. I mean, it's unfortunate. I wish that wasn't the bar. Like, I wish it didn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to be that way, but it is. And while I don't think like the average person should be held to that, like I'm not going to hold someone responsible who's got, who is just like, you can't expect it. But, where we can try to help make people understand, and provide them with the knowledge so they could choose to do it on their own, I think there's obviously no harm, only help that could be done there. You know, like I hate,
True.
I really hate people who do the whole Monday morning quarterbacking or armchair commentary on protest movements that aren't meant to be constructive in this way. Like you want to offer up a suggestion of some sort, do that. You don't shit on them and act like what they did was bad or like you want to help make them better. That's, you could offer it up, but you're not, like, it's just ridiculous to me. Like, you're not in the situation down there. You're not like anyone in any
Taking a lot
situation.
of things for granted. That's
Right.
what they're doing. They're taking a lot of things for granted.
Right. I
You know
mean,
what I mean?
you don't. It's easy to say you would have thrown that pass the next morning, but when you were standing there on the field, and you had 300-pound guys running at you, or whatever it is. I shouldn't do sports analogies because I'm terrible at. But you get what I'm saying. When you have a lot of big guys running at you on the sports ball field, then your brain's thinking your brain's thinking a different way than when you're sitting at home in front of the computer watching the clip of what you did. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, fight or flight is the thing. Fight or
Right.
flight is the thing.
right.
And you have to
And
make choices in a crisis. You just,
Right.
it's just, you know what I mean?
right.
That lack of leadership. You know what I mean? That's what this administration is highlighted. And you know what? Something else about Trump, despite all the hate and all that stuff, I still see his freaking humanity, because I see his biggest shortcoming is his insecurity. Like
Right.
if he had dealt with that a long time ago, we'd actually be in trouble right now.
Oh yeah, I think that's something people really don't get. We are the luckiest people on the planet that Trump is as incompetent and stupid as he is, because you put someone, an authoritarian like figure, in a position of power, surround him with the people he surrounded him with, and if he was a tactician and knew what he was doing, if he was an operator like Dick Cheney was an operator, we would be in trouble.
I was just about to say, people forget about Dick Cheney. They didn't live through it. They didn't see how people talk about three-dimensional chess and all that stuff. Like,
Like I talk
Yeah.
about this specific aspect all the time. No matter how bad Trump has been, and this isn't even me saying this as, in terms of, I'm a white person, so obviously I can say this. No, I mean, in general, you just look at the shared experience of everyone in this country. Maybe the one addendum is immigrants and Trump's deportation policies. That's a little bit different in terms of that. But everything else, George Bush, what he did to black people, what he did to Muslim Americans, what he did to everyone in this country, really, in terms of the people he surrounded him with, and how we like to say Bush was stupid, and yeah, sure, he was a fool too, but he surrounded himself with very incompetent people, and unlike Trump, he didn't have the same ego, so he was ready to say, those people I've surrounded myself with are smarter than me, so I'm going to listen to them. And those people got all the terrible shit they wanted done. Look at if they didn't want to do something, they knew exactly how to not do it. I mean,
Yep.
there's a huge difference between seeing the Katrina response and then seeing how Bush responded to a hurricane, the hurricane in Puerto Rico. Like,
The one that destroyed Puerto Rico, the one that destroyed
Yeah.
Mexico, every single tragedy that's happened
Yeah.
since his administration.
yeah, it's like
The wildfires in California.
right. It's like you see just
Every single one.
the incompetence is astounding, but at the same time, then you look at the Bush administration and how together they were, and how they sort of obviously could have done more, and they just decided not to until they had to. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't absolve either.
Yeah, I
they're
know
they're,
exactly
they're,
what you mean.
they're both shit, but it's important to know the difference, I think.
With that, Bush opened the door for Trump. So when people say like, "Oh, Bush," you know what I mean? We want Bush back. You know what I mean? We were nostalgic for Bush. They don't realize that if he hadn't done what he had done and he empowered the people he had empowered, we would have never even come close to getting somebody like Trump in office.
Oh, right. I mean,
We
the
would have had
whole
more respect for their. You know what I mean? Government, they're
Right.
politicians, and
I mean, you could really draw a line, and I mean, this isn't my opinion. This is just a known, I think, like a shared knowledge. Modern politics is basically begins with the Reagan administration,
hmm
and you move
even with
through
Nixon
the
in some ways,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But
with the
you move
FBI a little bit.
right, right. You move forward. I mean, of course. I guess you could say modern politics in general probably starts with FDR and the New Deal. That's where we start talking about
It,
right,
the money starts trickling. Yeah, the
right,
tax money starts going this way to that way. Yeah.
right.
hmm
But
Good point.
then but between FDR and Reagan though, there isn't this mass inequality. Obviously, there's racism and sexism and all this and everything else. Yes, but
We're still climbing
there's
as a
still yeah
country.
the
hmm
country as a whole is going somewhere. And again, what that means for people of color, obviously. But think about it though. If
Well, every time we get pushed back as a country, we get pushed back farther than
right, like imagine
other
if
groups. Yeah.
imagine if the racial progress from FDR to Reagan continued, and FDR to Obama, let's say, continued,
hmm
and the country continued to grow economically like it did from I don't know the 50s to Obama.
Yeah.
Like if we were,
Oh, I was joking with somebody about that the other day. It's like we would already have 5G internet.
right. Well, don't tell conspiracy theorists that because then they would be
Oh yeah.
already knocking down the 5G. It is. It's there's literally so much going on, and it really you know intersects in so many ways and overlaps in so many ways that it's so hard to really follow sometimes. Like the idea that the 5G internet conspiracy that it causes cancer or whatever it was at first, all of a sudden got wrapped up into the coronavirus, and you had people knocking down the 5G things that went up. It's ridiculous, but it just we are in a uncharted territory because of this pandemic. Really, I mean, because when was the last time there was this a global pandemic? What the Spanish flu? That's what most people say, right? I mean, yeah, other parts of the world had to deal with SARS, and we dealt with swine flu, but it wasn't the global pandemic. It was like an epidemic that affected a certain region, but never spread to becoming a worldwide catastrophe. This is the first one since the
hmm
Spanish flu, I believe. And I mean, how do you compare the two?
A
You
lot more
can't.
people now. A
Right,
lot more people now.
lot more
Good
people.
gosh, it
A lot
spread
more
around a
people.
lot faster.
Technology is a lot different.
Oh, true.
We're
That
a
helps
lot
out in a little bit of ways.
right. We're a lot more connected. So the idea that we can't social distance and lockdown to the point where we could eradicate this thing eventually is obviously. I mean, there's no more Spanish flu, is there? They did it without having Zoom to talk to people face to face, and FaceTime
Fact.
and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, the idea
I
that
was just making sure they weren't coughing on letters and stuff. That's all.
right. I mean, we're literally asking people to just put on a fucking mask, and there's people who are going, but my liberty and freedom. Like, are you kidding me? Just wear the goddamn mask. Like, because really, what wearing the mask does, it shows you how you view your role in society. I mean, you don't wear the mask, you're basically saying you view yourself as an individual. And what you do doesn't affect anybody else. Well, maybe in terms of, uh, there are probably things in this world where you do something bodily harm to yourself. You probably aren't affecting anyone but yourself and probably your immediate family. But this is a virus, and the masks are actually to protect the other people. Like the reason we need everyone to wear a mask is because the people who care about wearing the mask, if they wore a mask and we're the only ones who wore the mask, it doesn't help them. Because the mask is to
True.
keep your own shit from escaping.
Yep.
Because
Slow it down.
yeah,
Slow it down.
like the mask doesn't protect you from anyone getting the shit into you, because they can still seep it into your eyes or whatever. The mask is to keep your regular bodily fluids that fly out when you go ahead and through normal everyday life, when you talk or sneeze or whatever, it's to keep that from getting into the atmosphere. Because, you know, a lot less shit comes out of your eyes than comes out of your nose and mouth. You know what I mean? But
Absolutely.
but anything
And the
could,
other places to stay, you know what I mean?
right. But anything could go into anywhere, you know? So you wear the mask to protect others.
Absolutely.
So everyone wears the mask, everyone's protected. Only some people wear the mask. Only the people who aren't wearing the mask are protected. It's, you know, it's and there are studies out there that say, like, you know, it's not, you know, the masks aren't foolproof, and they're, you know, they only protect you from a certain amount of, well, yeah, because not everyone could afford or find the, you know, the certain, like, the what is it, the N95 medical quality masks. But something is better than nothing. Like, if you're telling me that it's helping a little, then yeah, that little bit means we're not all gonna could save somebody.
It adds up. You're talking about millions of people. You know what I mean? Together.
I mean, you could just look at how the countries that have become culturally accepted, that mask wearing has become culturally accepted, and how they've handled this. You look at South Korea. You look at Japan. You look at the other Asian and Southeast Asia countries who are used to wearing masks during, you know, I live in an area in the United States that's majority Asian American, majority Chinese, and majority Korean. I live in Queens. And for years, probably a decade now, if not more, just seeing
it actually has been. I've been up in New York before. I've seen what you're talking about. So the first thing I noticed when I got off the bus was people were wearing masks, and I thought it was because of the pollution. I didn't realize back then, that was my ignorance at the time, that no, they didn't want to spread things like the flu, bronchitis. You know what I mean? Like,
right, and it's not.
It's each other.
Honestly, it's obviously not all New York, because not all New York's like that. I mean, Manhattan, mask wearing would probably be a rarity, but in certain areas where Asian society has deemed through their own experience of dealing through epidemics like SARS, they have figured out that, you know, if we all wear masks, it may not eradicate it, but it makes it a lot less bad. And so they've decided that they care about doing that, and they do it. So, I mean, we only need to look at them and how they've handled this pandemic, and the numbers there in like South Korea, for example, have been astronomically low. Like, it's been unbelievable how they've handled it. I mean, and if you can't chalk up part of that to the mask, then I don't know how you just go through life not pretending that wasn't a part of that, you know. But some people just like to live in their own reality, you know.
We got to pop that bubble somehow, but I think it's just a matter of time. You know what I mean? It's truth is, you know, we all got to come to it in our own ways, So, man, it's been awesome talking with you.
It has been great, man. I'm happy. I wanted to keep you on because you know, as long as you wanted, because, you know, you said 7 years, so I got to make up for.
I didn't even think about that.
No, but this has actually been a really great conversation, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And feel free to call in anytime. It was a great talk, and I look forward to doing it again. Stay safe, man.
With a friend, I'll get you in contact with them, and we'll set up.
Right, you know how to find me on Twitter or whatever. Just DM me. DMs are open, or wherever you want to contact me. You could message me on, leave it. I don't know, email. I have an email up online. You can find it in my Twitter bio. Twitter's probably the best way to get in touch with me. At Matt Binder on Twitter.
No problem. All
right.
Well, adios, amigo.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. This has been great. The calls have been great. I'm not going to go to the comments because we just don't have time. We're on 2.5 hours now. And honestly, when I go through some good calls like the ones I had with Renee, and I can't remember if he gave me his first name or his Skype name, so I don't want to. I think he gave me his first name, so I could say Leonard. I wasn't sure if he wanted me to go by a anonymous username or his name, but Leonard, I think he said it was. So Renee and Leonard, great calls. Thank you so much, folks. Let me just check to make sure there are no super chats I'm missing. No, I think we good. Renee got that super chat in earlier. Thanks, Renee. If you're watching the live stream, patreon.com/MattBinder. If you're not watching the live stream and you have this show, then that means you're already a patron. Thank you. You know where to find me, at Matt Binder on Twitter, Matt Binder pretty much everywhere else. Just search youtube.com/MattBinder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Folks, I am going to do more shows, obviously. I've been doing, I went from, I believe, a show a week to 5 to 6 shows a month since the primaries, actually. And I've been trying to keep that steady. I believe we hit 5 in May now. I'm really trying to ramp it up. But also, those short clips for YouTube might help me do that too, because I could pop those out in less time probably than the 2.5 hours we just ran here. This has been so fun in terms of talking with people about this and hearing other people's perspectives. It has been sobering, I guess, to talk about this. Just really to get this off my chest in terms of what's going on and how it's being perceived and talked about. I'm talking to some good people who just couldn't be on this show because of the protests, and either someone couldn't do it because they were hurt, someone couldn't do it because they were covering them there. We will have them on. All right, see you all next time on Doomed.